All right. Good afternoon, Marlins fans. Welcome to another episode of the Miami Marlins Prospects Pod. My name is David Fernandez. I'm here with you, as always, with Joe Frisaro from manontoND.com. We're coming to you today on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel, and we're actually going to talk quite a bit about sort of the overall system for the Marlins, the state of the system almost, because MLB Pipeline recently released their updated rankings for the year. They do a preseason and a midseason ranking. So we're going to sort of take a look at what's going on with those midseason rankings, how it's all shaken out in the Marlins system, and then we're going to highlight some of the names that we think everybody should be keeping an eye on. That's the plan here for today. Joe, how's it going?
David, doing great. Yeah, I'm sporting it. Ethan got me the 5 Reasons hat, so it's put it on. I'm not a big hat guy, but in general, you go with the hat backwards. I'm not.
Yes, sir.
I'm not 25 anymore, so I don't do the hat backwards. But yeah, it's going to be a fun one. Yeah, MLB Pipeline. They came out. I believe it was yesterday. They revised it. Came out with their new top 100 revised. New Marlins top 30, as you noted, and because the last couple of years we've been hearing about, the Adley Rushmans or the Bobby Witt Juniors and, guys that may have been 1-2 heading into this year and how the draft now, some of those kids who were drafted are now in the systems that were just drafted in early August the All-Star break in a little bit later in July. But we got new number 1 in all of baseball, and it's Francisco Alvarez, catcher, New York Mets. Just to put him on the radar for fans. I know probably the diehard prospect fans know about him, but really talented, catcher with a ton of power. And what I find interesting, David, is the Mets having, you never have too much catching, obviously. And Francisco is 20 years old. Basically got 70 power, so he's got a ton of power. Obviously you look for the catchability as well. But what I found interesting is the Mets in the first round took catcher Kevin Parada out of Georgia Tech. We had talked about him as a potential Marlins, drafting Kevin, which I find it fascinating because I kind of agree with it. If the Mets felt Parada's the best guy on the board, even if they got their catcher of the future or potential all-star catcher right there in front of him.
Yeah, as you said, we talked a lot about Parada, and there's no guarantee that he stays a catcher. And when you're that high on the draft board, you want to take the best player available to you. And we're going to get to that because we are going to talk a little bit about the Marlins first round pick, Jacob Berry, a little bit later. But yeah, this new top 10 from MLB, you mentioned Alvarez checking in there as the number 1 prospect. The Orioles have a pair of top 5 guys in Gunnar Henderson and Grayson Rodriguez. They are in great shape in terms of their rebuild, and they're competitive. They're kind of what I think a lot of people were hoping the Marlins would be this year. The Orioles are, and they've got plenty of talent coming right behind. We've got Corbin Carroll there from the Diamondbacks, and then Anthony Volpe rounding out the top 5 from the Yankees. We talked about Volpe earlier this year when we were kind of messing around with potential Pablo Lopez deals. The back end of this top 10, Jordan Walker, the third baseman / outfielder from St. Louis, Gabriel Moreno, the catcher from Toronto, who we've also talked about earlier this year, Marcelo Meyer, a shortstop for the Red Sox, Diego Cartaya as a catcher for the Dodgers, and then the Marlins' very own Eury Perez, dominant right-hand pitcher, checking in there at number 10. He is the second highest rated pitcher on the board there, and he's somebody that, Marlins fans should be really, really excited about because actually last night on Twitter, somebody posted a funny meme. One of the Marlins Twitter guys, he just basically matched up Perez and then Edward Cabrera and Sandy Alcantara with the evolution of a specific Pokemon character, and it's pretty fun when you think of it in that way. Those 3 guys, if they could be anything like what Sandy's doing, the Marlins are set. But we learned last week that Eury Perez landed on the injured list with a shoulder issue Joe, you were telling me before we went live that you've got a little bit more information on what's going on.
Yeah. I still want to talk a little bit more of some of the other guys before we get to Yuri, but just not to keep teasing on that. But Yuri, I found out it's I think it was reported a mild shoulder ailment. I've heard it's a lat, and they feel a lat injury. That's right in there. They feel that they caught it early enough, very mild, and they feel they dodged a bullet with Yuri, so his health should be fine. Again, we're going to dive really into the Marlins top 10, so we're going to get back to Yuri in a minute. But I tell you, in that top list there, you noted the Orioles. Obviously, they really with Adley Rutschman, being the first guy, the catcher now, he's up in the big leagues, and Gunnar Henderson is a guy. It's interesting because they drafted 1-1. Again, Jackson Holliday, Matt Holliday's kid, because Henderson's a shortstop, third baseman. We know projections right out of high school or whatnot. Those guys can change positions, but really, really talented. And it's a real debate who is really better, Henderson or Grayson Rodriguez. I've heard so much really, like who really should be the number one prospect with the Baltimore Orioles. And that prospect also could legitimately be 1-1 as well as Alvarez with the Mets. So I think Orioles, building it through the draft, building it through international signings and so forth. But those are two, especially Grayson Rodriguez, who probably would have been the big leagues already, but he had an injury. I think it was a lat as well, but it was a little more, serious that cost him being up there right now. But keep an eye on these guys in that top 10. Corbin Carroll, left-handed hitting outfielder for Arizona. He's probably be in the big leagues before the year's over. It would be, it makes a ton of sense. He's just tearing it up. He's 21 years old, left-handed hitter. His stats are very impressive. I mean, talk about dominating a level, and I always talk about that a lot. Overall, Corbin Carroll's hitting .314 at 3 teams this year. .431 on base, .613 slugging. He's at at 21 homers, 19 doubles, 8 triples. So obviously their speed. This is the top of the order type of legit leadoff hitter who can do some damage. At AAA Reno, 305, 422, 516, 938 slugging. And when he was at AA, which is a good bit of the year, 313, 430, 643 slugging. So keep an eye on Corbin Carroll as well, because these are the new names that can be knocking on the door. Hey, we talk a lot about baseball in the future and connecting with the younger generation. These guys are all 19, 20, 21. Just the other day I was talking to Brian Snitker about Vaughn Grissom, who's 21. We talked about Vaughn in the past, and Snit noted these kids are getting here a lot faster, and they're not just getting there; they're getting here ready. Doesn't mean they're automatically going to be hitting 300 from day one in the big leagues, but they don't seem overmatched, and a lot of them are doing really well. And these are some of the guys in that top 10 I think people should keep an eye on.
Yeah, one of those younger prospects. I mean, we mentioned him already. He's the Marlins' top prospect, Yiddi Cappe. He is somebody at 19 years old, with an aggressive promotion to AA to start the season. Some people maybe question that, especially after his first couple starts this year. But then he really settled in and became, a dominant pitcher. He ended up getting to the Futures game and performed really, really well. Landed recently on the injured list with that shoulder issue, but again, very precautionary. He kind of headlines the Marlins side of this prospects discussion. We were showing you the top 10 for the MLB overall. The Marlins, when we're looking at it from a top 100 perspective, because that was the ranking that they updated, the top 100, the Marlins actually had 3 guys check in the top 100. So Perez checked in at 10, and then Max Meyer checked in at 46, and then Jacob Berry checked in at 52. Those 3, having 3 in the top 100 is literally half of what it was a year ago at this time. When MLB Pipeline issued their midseason rankings in August of 2021, the Marlins had 6 players on the top 100 list Cahill Watson, who was at 28, Edward Cabrera at 30, Meyer at 31, Sixto Sanchez at 45, J.J. Bleday at 77, and Jake Eder at 82. Now, some of those names have graduated from prospect status for the Marlins. Others have been injured for, an extended period of time. So it kind of massaged some things. And then with Watson, the case of Cahill Watson, it's largely been underperformance for his drop. But let's take a look here at the Marlins top 30 at this point, which has been updated. We'll start with their top 10. And Eury Perez, our boy, up there at the top, number 1. Max Meyer, number 2. Jacob Berry, number 3. Jake Eder, the left-handed pitcher who's missed the last year following Tommy John. He's number 4. Jose Salas at number 5. Yiddi Cappe at number 6. Cahill Watson at 7. J.J. Bleday at 8. Dax Fulton at 9. And Joe Mack at 10. We've talked a lot about some of these guys throughout the season. We've talked very positively about some. We've talked about the struggles for some of the others. We were talking about how just those top 3 names are the only ones among the MLB top 100. Joe, when you're looking at this new top 10 for the Marlins, does anybody stand out to you?
Yeah, just first to note, as the system's been strong. It's been a lot stronger. I'm not sure. People could say top 5, top 10, whatever it was. They have big leaguers and good number of them. But now that JJ's up, he'll be, he's number 8 right now. It doesn't even matter because he's going to lose. He's going to graduate fairly soon. Obviously, he's in the big leagues and showing promise there. So you're going to have a little bit of regression. You're going to have Burdick coming off it. You had Max. Now, unfortunately for Max, the injury is going to cost him a whole year. Yeah. So I think the system's down a little bit, to be honest. But that's understandable because not just this year. Edward, Cabrera, all these guys that kind of loaded that system up are guys to keep an eye on. But the guy I'm keeping a real eye on, and we'll get to Jake Eder in a minute, is Jacob Berry, and I'll tell you why. Because here's a kid we kind of put him on the map for everyone. We really kind of nailed that he could be fitting what the Marlins are looking for, and he's one of those guys that again, he played the college season. He's switch hitter. Who knows how much downtime he had. The numbers haven't been great, but I'm not really. This year it's just the feel of pro ball, getting used to living down here and getting acclimated to a program. So I'm just going to pay attention to Berry as he just kind of gets his feet wet. Next year I'll kind of really dig in if this is the answer. I don't think he's a third baseman. I think that and I know what DJ Spillick said, and he insists he is, and the kid's a hard worker, and again, you let the kid and you let the performance dictate. I think he'll wind up at first base ultimately. I hope they're working him at both spots, to be honest with you, and then just get used to pro ball, because it's different hitting wood bats every day, not half metal and half wood. But he's a guy I'm very high on, and I'm not getting caught up in what he's doing right now because again, it's an orientation kind of year. When you just join a team halfway through, again, who knows how active he was the last month. Everybody else is kind of 400 at bats or pitchers with 20 starts. You know what I mean? They should be sharper than someone just coming off the street. And give me 100, 200 at bats, and then we're going to kind of see. You get a feel for what kind of player he's going to be.
Yeah, so just to take a quick look at how he's playing right now, they promoted him to low A Jupiter relatively quickly. I think he got his feet wet in pro ball with the Florida Complex League. I think it was about 3 games over there, and then he was up to low A Jupiter in short order. Obviously, the number 6 overall pick in the 2022 MLB draft, hitting 229 after 12 games. And he's got a 528 OPS. He's got 1 double and 8 RBI. In those 12 games played, 11 of those 12, he has made the start over at third base. The other start was at DH. So we haven't seen the pro debut of him over at first base quite yet. 11 for 48 here through those first 12 games. 2 walks, 2 hit by pitch, and then only 6 strikeouts. So 11% strikeout rate, which is sort of what we were sold on with Barry, having a good command of the strike zone. Interestingly, he has been more effective as a left-handed hitter thus far, hitting 250 versus a right-handed hitter, 188. But that one double did come when he was hitting as a righty. So maybe the power comes from the right side and the consistently comes from the left. You have talked in the past about maybe switch hitters when they're kind of stuck like that in the middle. I mean, you want to abandon one side or the other and just kind of focus on the stronger of the two sides. We'll see how that develops for Barry. But when you're looking at the Marlins, top 30 at this point, Barry slots in there very, very high, maybe a little too high in my opinion, because we haven't
That's projection. It's just in fairness, Pipeline is doing projection. They're not necessarily doing, the other aspects of it.
Absolutely. And he's a guy that we're going to keep a close eye on. He's older, at the low A Jupiter level. So I think the anticipation for the Marlins is that he's going to move through, or the hope at least, is that he'll move through the system relatively quickly, because one of the things that stands out to me from the new top 30 for the Marlins is that the majority, especially on the position player side, the majority of these prospects are all in the lower levels of the minors. There's very, very little at the AAA level that's ready to sort of help and support the big club, later this year or even a year from now. So, definitely something to keep an eye on.
Can I make one more point before we move on, Dave, on Barry? And this, I'm going to compare it to Bleday. And I asked Donnie yesterday about JJ. And we know JJ's batting averages, even at AAA, were lower, but the slugging's there. Obviously, the home runs, but not just the homers. JJ was hitting a lot of doubles. And, and Donnie kind of attributed that to JJ, just kind of the good eye of the zone and an idea of what guys are trying to do with them. But what I like about JJ is the extra base hit threat. And right now with Barry, I'm not expecting him, especially in those backfields in Jupiter and what used to be the Florida State League, those ballparks are hard to homer in. But I do anticipate or expect to see, and we'll be monitoring his slugging percentage much more than, give me a bunch of doubles. If you hit 10 homers for me there, but you got 30 doubles or something like that, then I'm like, okay, this, he's going to elevate a little more. He'll be in a little more favorable conditions for homering. But that's something, because I think those guys line up as kind of body type and project middle of the order type impact hitters. So again, that's probably, I'd like to see more than one double. And again, it's only 11 games, but that's what I would like to see a little more from Jacob Barry.
Absolutely. Another name that we're going to touch on here from this top 10 before we move on to the rest of the top 30. You'll notice left-handed pitcher Jake Eder slots in as the number 4 overall prospect with these new rankings from MLB Pipeline. We haven't seen Eder in over a year because of his Tommy John surgery last year. 23 years old, 6'4" left-handed pitcher. He's coming off that Tommy John surgery from last summer. The number 4 prospect, as we've mentioned. Last year at AA Pensacola, he posted a 3-5 record, but a really impressive 1.77 ERA with a sub-1 WHIP, 0.98 WHIP, 99 strikeouts and 27 walks over 71 1/3 innings pitched. His fastball sits between 93 and 96, and it does touch 98. And he's got a slider, a low 80 slider that's got some nice horizontal break to it. And he started his return, his sort of rehab return from that Tommy John surgery, started throwing off the mound back in early July, and he's targeting a spring training return for next season. So the Marlins lost Max Meyer and Cody Poteet to Tommy John surgery. Yeah. They're getting back, though, Jake Eder, who immediately sort of moves to the front end of this list. What do you have on Jake Eder, Joe?
Just a lot to like. It's all health right now. It's about, staying on his recovery, which Tommy John, when I started covering baseball, was for starter. Relievers can make it a little bit faster back. It was 12 to 18 months, they said. Then all of a sudden, it was 14 to 18 months. And I still feel that's the safest to let that new ligament really attach itself. So you can't rush it. So it's just a matter. I find Jake Eder a very interesting prospect who could really help the Marlins in 23, not just being on the mound. Because let's say you're targeting a July 1 appearance next July, right around a month or so before the deadline. He buys you, I could trade not just Pablo in the offseason to get the offense, but either Braxton Garrett or Trevor Rogers. Because I got a frontline caliber, or at least a number 3 in a rotation kind of profile caliber left-hander that makes that. Now, obviously, I'm also a big on don't trade your surplus, but since I don't anticipate the Marlins signing major free agent hitters, and they have to get a pathway to getting hitters through their pitching, and I could see Eder making 3 pitchers available. Like if I'm the GM and I'm playing, wearing my GM hat, pretend it says GM, not 5 reasons. It's like that's what I'm kind of thinking.
Yeah.
If everything's tracking well, hey, look, obviously you're not going to get Pablo away, but you get that deal. Now, if you move Pablo, you don't have to move Brax or Trevor. But one of those 3 would probably, because I'm not moving Yuri, I'm probably not moving Edward. And with Eder in the fold and Luzardo still there, that gives you a lot of flexibility to do that, and then still have a degree of upper level AAA depth, that because guys, as we know, always break down or either performance or injury. But Eder fits that. I loved him last year. I've said it on my podcast. I'm not sure I said it on this podcast, but he was the guy last year when I took my early retirement. I was kind of still trying to figure out how I was going to kind of stay involved. I had people in the industry reaching out saying, make sure I knew about Jake Eder before a lot of people knew. He was just turning heads at the alternate camp back in 2020, like shortly after being drafted out of Vanderbilt. And then certainly when he got into the minor leagues and just carving people up, he was in the futures game, a year ago in 2021.
Yep.
Left-hander, I love the body type. I like the, and it was funny. I was looking at your graphic, David. 1.77 ERA. What has he got? 99 Ks and 71 in the third innings. Whip under 1. He's not allowing a base runner an inning on average. Yet 3 and 5.
Yeah.
3 and 5. What more? How are you losing?
Yeah.
How are you losing with him on the mound?
That's it's funny. I guess minor league stats are funny that way, right? The wins and losses. I mean, wins and losses for pitchers. I mean, and this is a tangent that we could probably do an entire show on. But wins and losses for a pitcher is kind of a faulty stat. But yeah, 3 and 5 with those kinds.
How do you have 8 decisions and 5 of them losses with all the measures? No one's getting on base. No one's scoring runs. Yet somehow you're losing.
Yeah, it tells you about that Blue Wahoo's offense a year ago. They've been much better this year. Their lineup has been potent this year. It's too bad that he wasn't pitching here in 2022. Those numbers, the win-loss record at the very least could have been flipped.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, listen. I think the key word that you mentioned there, Joe, is versatility or flexibility. Where the Marlins, if Jake Eder can be the guy that everybody hopes he can be, that everybody envisions him, like front end starter, number 3 starter. I mean, he's got a higher ceiling, in my opinion, than a guy like Braxton Garrett. And Garrett's done really, really well at the major league level. And then, with Rogers, I think it's a matter for Rogers kind of trying to rediscover that form.
Well, we'll know in spring training, right, with Trev. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, I know that he's on the IL at this point. I think he's got a rehab start in Pensacola coming up soon. But those 3 guys, as you mentioned, those 3 guys are all going to be in the mix, and Luzardo, another left-handed starter as well. I mean, those guys are the guys that the Marlins will probably zero in on a couple of them, and then maybe flip the other 2 to try and improve the lineup, which we all know at this point needs to be improved. They finally scored 4 runs for the first time, it felt like a century yesterday. Yeah. So, but that's the kind of thing that they're going to have to do. Identify the pitchers that they want to hold on to, and then use those other pitchers to improve the organization in other areas.
Yeah, and I hope that Eder's one that they choose to hold on to,
Yeah,
rather than he be the one they move, because I think he's one of those guys who, if they move him, I just had this sense he's going to be that guy that never pitched an inning for the Marlins, and yet we're going to be sitting here 4 years from now going, what? This guy's like in the All-Star game, and who is this guy? And we had him, and because but again, spring training will dictate, and a lot of it, I think I noted Trevor just didn't look like the same Trevor in spring training, and it never really clicked for him in the season. Sometimes spring training can be deceiving, but just ball out of hand just really didn't look the same. But we'll get a feel how ball out of hand, especially for Eder, who hasn't faced hitters. Yes, okay, sim games or whatnot, but we're talking about real hitters, major league hitters, the Mets lineup, the Braves lineup. That's what's going to tell how he's looking there. But that's another scenario too. If they do move Pablo in the offseason, and Jake is ready to come in mid-season, you kind of get in the field. Does that then mid-season trade of either Brax or Trevor or even Luzardo, if depends on how circumstances full. But I want if we do anything in these podcasts, I try to convey is kind of think this way, because fans think, oh, we'll just trade him, but there's usually a process to when you trade and why you trade. But I think Eder gives them that flexibility, assuming no setbacks, obviously, and all things being equal. He's a guy I could see, making the rest of their roster interesting. I do want to talk about, I think we'd be remiss if we don't mention Watson a little bit more, because that is disappointing. He's 7, he's out of the top 100, and it's really, you just hope organizationally and the player, kind of find some, get it together where his head's right and the organization's got a positive feel, because he's way too young to quit on as a talent. And I don't know if he's, just one of those years, first full year in pro ball, but I really hope that there's a lot of work done to just kind of mend, because I know I've seen a lot of players, if you feel that someone's not believing in you, it affects your performance, and it could really compound. So I'm hoping that the steps are being made, that Watson, ends this year, which hasn't been his year, for multiple reasons, performance, and then, issues dealing with disciplinary measures as well, that he finds it, because I'd hate to see a really talented kid, waste the potential. I'm not quitting on the kid. I don't think our fan base should either. But I also think that, it's got to be massaged a lot better to make sure he comes into 23 ready to be a top 50, top 30 prospect, not on the outside, number 7 he shouldn't be number 7 on anybody's list.
Yeah. And, as you said, nobody should be quitting on Watson right now. He's 19 years old. He's way too young and way too talented for people to move off of. And, it was a precipitous drop from last season's rankings, 28 overall in MLB to being out of the top 100. But hopefully he can put it together. The other name in this top 100, actually right ahead of Watson, kind of jumped Watson in this latest ranking, was Yiddi Cappe. He's a guy that the Marlins signed out of Cuba in 2021 for $3.5 million. He's the number 6 prospect, as we said, per MLB Pipeline. He was recently promoted to Low A Jupiter in July. And over his 20 games at Low A Jupiter, he's hitting .333 so far with an .807 OPS. He's got 4 doubles, a triple, a homer, 8 RBI, 6 stolen bases, and a really nice low K rate at 11%. He's 6'3". He's a big boy, shortstop. He's got some star upside to him, but he may end up outgrowing the shortstop position. He's not particularly he's not a blazer on the base paths or anything like that. So he may end up transitioning over to third base. But he's a guy that Marlins fans should definitely be keeping an eye on, because, maybe he's the third baseman of the future. So what do you have on Yiddi Cappe, Joe?
Yeah, and I'm glad you're bringing him up, and we're going to dive in. And as we move forward, we're also going to dive in on the lower levels. We've talked a lot about the upper. What I got on him is he might be the best hitter in the system.
Yeah.
He's a little young to make that, but of all the hitters, if you had to look at this list and then project it out 5 years from now, who's going to be the best hitter, and that includes Bleday on that list right now, he might be it. Yeah. And it's big shoes to fill, but so in other words, a lot to be excited about, and that shows. The Miami Marlins offering $3.5 million to an international player. I know they gave $5 million to Victor. That's a little bit different because they kind of broke into the international market and signed players that normally the Yankees or Red Sox, would grab. So Cappe, or however, I don't want to butcher the kid's name or the pronunciation, but he is someone to be excited about. And when I read here, I know Pipeline's little scouting summary, drawing comparisons to Carlos Correa. I mean, that plays for me.
Absolutely. And he, again, somebody to keep an eye on. We'll, as the season progresses, we'll continue to look at some of these guys in the lower levels. And I mean, again, he was at the Florida Complex League until mid-July. So really raw in terms of prospect. You want to see the power start to come with him because it does look like he may eventually sort of move over to third base. And third base is one of those positions that the Marlins kind of have up in the air. I know we've talked about Jacob Berry, but is he really a third baseman? Yeah. Jordan Groshans, who the Marlins acquired, he may end up moving over to third base, but at third base, you really want somebody with some pop in their bat, with some, high slugging percentage.
Yeah. I mean, these are years away. I see Groshans more of a utility, more of a second, third, wherever they could use them. Cappe, I see as somebody who's you're penciling hitting 2, 3, 4 in your lineup, or for years to come. He's probably also going to be a guy that will command a lot of trade interest. If depending on what the Marlins do, whether they go big, pitching prospect him for a big bat, as well. Another guy there, and I'm always a little more cautious of a 19-year-old, coming out of international ball without really, you really start knowing what these guys or who these guys are when they get to Double-A. To be honest, I've seen plenty of guys just tearing up lower levels, and then you get to Double-A, and it's like, oh my God, this is a completely different ball game. But we will dig more into that lower level because I think there's the most talent in the system is there. Overall, I think you got one to mention as well.
Yeah, and so let's look at some of those other guys. So this is numbers 11 through 20 for the Marlins top 30. Jacob Miller, who was drafted this year at number 11. Sixto Sanchez, at this point, the seemingly forgotten pitching prospect, hasn't pitched in a game since October of 2020. So we're pushing almost 2 years for Sanchez. Jordan Groshans, who we mentioned, Peyton Burdick, who we saw recently called up to the Marlins, Gerard Encarnacion at number 15, somebody that we've talked about at length this year, Victor Mesa Jr., the younger brother of Victor Mesa, Ian Lewis, Carson Milbrandt, the right-handed pitcher the Marlins drafted this year, Antony Peguero, an outfielder, and then Jose Gerardo, another outfielder. So this is 11 through 20, according to MLB Pipeline. Some interesting names on here, but also some names that we haven't seen in a while, and some guys that have sort of dealt with some injury issues. Ian Lewis has had a hand injury that's held him out for a while. Obviously, Sixto, and then some of the new names in the system are kind of slotting in there. What do you have on any of these guys, Joe? 11.
Yeah, first, I almost wish that these systems. I'm almost in favor, David, of 2 top 100s. Yeah. Your A level, high and low A, or if you want to do 50, and then your Double-A, Triple-A. Because to me, Sixto Sanchez, if you haven't pitched in the big leagues and you haven't pitched in the minor leagues because of injury, he's on the list, and I get it. You don't want to, you know what I mean? And then you get guys like Gerard. Where's he fit anymore? He's already tasted the big leagues. We kind of got an idea of what it's going to be about when he gets there, whether he's ranked in the top 5 on the Marlins or top 25 or 25 to 30, doesn't really matter. His kind of momentum and his timeline is kind of passing. But I am really interested in Antony Peguero. This is a kid, 17 years old, and international player. And those are the guys at the academy that they have in the Dominican summer leagues, and and he was part of the 2021 international class. Signed him for $575,000. Just an interesting, young player. But again, he's 6 foot tall, 175. Obviously, he's going to be a projectable type of body. But that's just a name. I know we talk a lot about pitching because that's where the Marlins' strength is as an organization. But hitters with a chance, he is one that I'm hearing could be a hitter who has a chance.
Yeah, and we'll talk about him more a little bit in a second. But if you look at this list, as you mentioned, like guys like Sixto, Peyton Burdick, Gerard, those guys are all going to come off this list in short order because they're going to graduate from their prospect status. And then some of the younger guys on here, it'll be really, really interesting to keep track of them as they progress through the system, because they're kind of the next wave of names for the Marlins. And then really the two key arms from this year's draft, Jacob Miller and Carson Milbrandt, those guys are checking in here kind of in the middle of the top 30 for the Marlins. Those guys, again, we need to keep a close eye on them, because as these other pitching prospects either move into the major league level or move out of the organization via trade or what have you, those are the next guys that will sort of fill in the gaps behind them. So just a quick look at numbers 21 through 30 here before we wrap up. Ronald Hernandez at 21, a catcher. Troy Johnston at 22. He was recently promoted to AAA Jacksonville. Cody Morissette, second baseman. Zach McCambley, a right-handed pitcher, is at 24. Nasim Nunez, who we talked about last week, at number 25. Griffin Conine at 26. Jordan McCants, middle infielder, at number 27. And then some interesting arms down here at the back end of it. MD Johnson and Marcus Johnson, both right-handed pitchers, at 28 and 29. And then somebody who just got his call to the majors recently, left-handed pitcher Andrew Nardi, who we've talked about quite a bit. This is another stretch of the top 30 that's kind of got a mix of guys that the Marlins have to make a decision on quickly, because guys like Conine and Johnson, they are Rule 5 eligible at this point. So do you lose guys like that? I mean, they put Nardi obviously on the roster. We've talked about how Nardi was also Rule 5 eligible going into this offseason. Do any of these names jump out at you, Joe?
Yeah, let's just talk about Nardi, because like we said, and I was there last night seeing him make his major league debut. I thought he did fine. Yeah. He ends up 3 earned runs in an inning and a third. But keep this in mind, and I know there's a lot of people screaming at Donnie putting in Ellie Iser and extending some guys. He had like 4 guys down, in the bullpen. So Nardi, here's a guy who went 1, 2, 3 with a strikeout in his first inning, but being asked to throw his second inning against the Juan Soto, and he draws a walk there, and Josh Bell and Machado, and I think it was Elias who got Machado, but I thought he was fine. I thought he did. Yeah. I thought he did fine. He's going to do well. There, he's going to do well, but again, just the ERA, you kind of feel badly for him, because that. Your debut is, I did great, and then you stay in another inning, and your ERA is like in the 20s because you got 3 runs allowed and 1 in the third inning. But I think he's the guy keep an eye on. We talked about Nasim. He's the guy I've reminded to don't pay as much attention to the numbers. Look at the talent and the player. Guy who just has a knack for the game.
He scored 5 runs the other day. Nunez.
He knows how to play the game.
He scored 5 runs without actually registering a hit in the game. He had 3 walks or 4 walks and like 3 stolen bases and 5 runs, but he didn't get a hit. I mean, he's fun to watch.
Yeah, that's hard to do, but it just shows that he can impact the game in more ways than just getting a hit. I'm a little, disappointed. Zach McCambley, he's been a friend of the podcast. We had him on. Just didn't have a great year. So next year is going to be really big for him. Like you noted about Troy Johnston, if you get out to see the shrimp anytime soon, you'll have more on him. And then, what they do with Conine is he just a product of just a deep at that position, where they're kind of loaded with this kind of corner outfielders who aren't true center fielders playing there. And another thing to keep an eye on with Griffin Conine is they're in the market for a center fielder.
Yep.
So they can make a trade, and then it's going to be, how's Conine moving? Is he going to move ahead of Jesus Sanchez? Is Jesus Sanchez part of the plans? Is, are they sold that Burdick is part of it? Are they sold that, some of these other guys? We talked about Brian Miller before. It's like, I just think there's a surplus that, he could be vulnerable, long term.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as you said, vulnerable in Rule 5 draft. We're talking about him getting poached at that point, but they have they're loaded, really. I mean, overloaded at this point with those corner outfielder / DH types. I mean, maybe Encarnacion moves to first base, but even then, I mean, Lewin Diaz is supposed to be getting the regular playing time at first base. So, like, where do you place these guys? The Marlins have a lot of work to do from a roster standpoint because, I mean, to lose a guy like Conine who has a legitimate major league skill with his power, or guys like Troy Johnston, who he doesn't have the power that Conine has, but he has a very consistent bat. He's an extra base machine, a doubles machine. He's a guy that could be valuable down the line. It'll be interesting to see how those shake out. And you mentioned McCambly. Absolutely a down year for him. But if you remember, Braxton Garrett had a very sort of similar slide before he sort of like finally landed in, with the major leagues, in the major league level with the Marlins. So maybe McCambly has something like that, kind of a step back, and then hopefully
I hope so. He's a great kid who's a good hard worker, and you just kind of hope he finds that bread and butter is that curveball, and you just hope that he finds that pitch and it makes it a real weapon for him. Maybe he's more of a reliever profile. If he is, he's, how old's Zach? He's like 23, so he'll be 24. He's a May birthday, so he'll be 24 in May. That you kind of say, hey, look, you're that. And I think that they should be looking at, not everyone's a starter, but maybe he's not a closer, but he might be that long man, that 2-inning and 1+ inning guy that could really help. I think Neidert's in that boat. Although Neider gets some spot starts from time to time, but McCambly could be that kind of weapon. But again, you got to kind of find what works, and a lot of times that is just get that one pitch back, get that plus pitch back, and then work your as long as you're locating your fastball, even without a dominant fastball, you could have a lot of value in the big leagues.
Yeah, and just to look at the guys that were sort of the highest riser and the lowest faller in these new rankings, Antony Peguero, as you mentioned earlier, he was not ranked going into the preseason, and then with this midseason update, he's all the way up at 17 years old, part of the 2022 international free agent class. With the Dominican Summer League at the moment, he is hitting .298 with a .783 OPS, 9 doubles, 4 homers, and 29 RBI. He's definitely a guy to keep an eye on, but at 17 years old, he is a ways away.
Yeah.
The one that had the biggest drop was pitcher Evan Federer, who the Marlins drafted in the 5th round of the 2019 draft. Preseason, he was actually number 19, and now midseason, he's not ranked. He's had his struggles with high A Beloit this year at 4-6. He's got a 4.75 ERA, a 1.43 WHIP, 86 2/3 innings pitched with 68 strikeouts, but 40 walks for Evan Federer. So that's kind of the big problem for him. I mean, those are two names to keep an eye on, obviously. Joe, you were talking a little bit earlier about Peguero. Can you kind of reiterate some of the things that you're excited about?
Like I said, you just look for those guys with a hit tool. Those guys who kind of have that knack for hitting and kind of tearing it up. Yes, it's a lower level, but that's production. You saw extra base hits, you saw homers and doubles and OPS and all this stuff right there. Obviously, these are very young kids at 17. So just you hear those names and you see a little bit of them, and then you could say, okay, that looks like it could play out and be someone to keep an eye on. Federer, I feel terrible for the guy. But, I was at the Fall League last year. I didn't see him pitch. He didn't happen to fall that way. I think he even got shut down. He's dealt with arm injuries, and and I just feel bad that his career hasn't gone the way he had expected it. The health is a big part of that. And if you're not completely right, you see 40 walks, you see, but again, I think Federer is more of just his career is just he's dealt with a lot of adversity that has set him back. We certainly wish Evan the best and that regains it, because at one point, you were a top 20 in an organization player. And so that's going to be to see whether Evan could regain that.
Yeah, and listen, the book's not closed on him or really on any of these prospects, right? They're still very, very young, and they're kind of working through their issues at the minor league level. And the idea here moving forward with this podcast, we're going to keep a close eye, particularly on some of the lower level talent that maybe we haven't talked about as much throughout the season, because obviously we spent a lot of time kind of looking at AAA players and AA players who could help the big club. Well, we've seen a lot of those guys move up to the big club at this point, and we'll keep an eye on how they're performing at the major league level. But now moving forward, not only are we going to talk about sort of more prospects, beyond just the Marlins, kind of touch on some of the big names throughout Major League Baseball, but we're also going to look specifically at some of the lower levels, just to give you a sense of, what's going on down the line, because those are guys at the lower levels that are not going to help the Marlins next year or maybe even 2 years from now, but they're definitely pieces that will be valuable to the organization from a depth perspective, and then obviously in making any trades and things of that nature. But for today, that's kind of going to do it for us. Make sure that you like and subscribe. If you've got somebody that you would like us to talk about, drop a comment below or tag us on social media. On Twitter, I'm at @DL Fernandez. You can get Joe at Joe Frisaro or at Man on 2ND on Twitter. And if there's somebody that you want us to take a look at, we can definitely do that. Just either drop the comment or tag us on social. If you see the scroll down below, dugoutmugs.com/Man on 2ND, you can grab one of, there's a glare on mine, but you can grab a really nice, high-quality drinking vessel from dugoutmugs.com with your favorite baseball team's logo printed on it. And, again, we're going to keep an eye on what's going on with the system and what's going on with the other systems. And, we'll keep you in the loop, and we'll keep you educated on what's going on, giving you our opinions, obviously. If you're not following the 5 Reasons Sports Network on YouTube, you're missing out on not only this content, but also Joe's Marlins podcast with Eric. And, there's a ton of Miami Heat content. The Miami Dolphins are ramping up. I'm actually the host for...
Yeah, give yourself a little plug. You're doing some NFL. Good for you, David.
Yeah, the pregame show, we call it Yard Prep, and then the postgame show we're calling the Final Yard. So we'll be there pre and post for every Dolphins game. And then obviously there's a ton of other content on the network. So make sure you like and subscribe. If you want us to talk about somebody, again, leave us a little note, leave us a comment. But for now, for Joe, I'm David. Thanks for watching, everybody.